Today on the Bumper to Bumper Roadmap, a little bit of automotive fact or fiction developed by Peter, our technician, open phones, and just so you know, Hallmark recognizes the month of October as National Car Care Month. At least I think they do.
Fall Car Care Month, Dave.
Oh, sorry. A little out there.
National is in April. I'm not sure why we need a national in the fall, but, you know.
So we're talking Car Care Month, and then, you know, Car Care Month, do-it-yourselfer projects. You know, cars have changed so much. What is a good do-it-yourselfer project? I hear people say all the time, you know, I used to change my spark plugs on my 77 Chevy. I could sit under the hood with a lawn chair in an ice chest and get to those spark plugs. What do people work on anymore?
Well, what do you mean, Dave? Are we talking father-son, do-it-yourself automotive projects? We're going to buy this car and restore it. That's one kind of DIYer, you know, do-it-yourselfer. The old, it's always the Mustang. I think that's what every father-son combo wants, or the old Volkswagen Bug.
And that's a fun project, you know, late 60s Mustang, restoring it. But the late model car, because the rules have changed so much, we're not talking about, you know, we're talking about cabin filters. We didn't have those in 1967.
And there's no pressure because usually the 68 Mustang doesn't have to get you to work on Monday.
Right, exactly. But what are some good projects that people can do? People like to be involved in their car and what's going on with it. And I know there's two types of customers that come to our auto shops. There's those who do work on their own car, and they'll come into the shop every now and then for things they don't want to do.
Or things they can't do. There's a lot of things you can do at home. So we have the same mix. There's things I can do, and I like to change. You know, maybe on my four-cylinder I can change my spark plugs, or I can do a couple things. But I can't do a transmission service, and I shouldn't be messing around with the antifreeze or doing a cooling system flush. So there's the ones that will share some of the work.
Well, so what are some of the basic ones? I think wiper blades. You know, here we are in the fall. We're going to do a car care. Run down to the Acme Auto Parts, pick up some wiper blades, air filter. Air filter's generally pretty easy. I know some of these cars, they make it, you got to be a, stand contortionist in order to change the air filter.
The one thing I will say before we go in further in talking about, just go down to Acme Auto Parts and get the wiper blades. Buy the good ones, please. Yeah. Don't get the cheap refill. Don't get
the ones out of the newspaper ad.
Yeah, get the one with the asterisk. There's only 4 of these. Like on the car commercial maybe. But get the good ones. Ask them. Okay, this is what you're recommending. What do you have that's better? Stick with a good quality. So, I mean, that's a lot of the problem. We haven't talked about the do-it-yourselfer that does a lot of his work or her work themselves. And then they end up at our shop saying, I did this and this and this and this and that, and it doesn't work. A lot of times we find what I would call the generic spark plugs. Get the right ones for the car.
Right.
That would be my first bit of advice, doing your home project.
Well, there's almost not a week that goes by where I don't have a customer came in that did try a do-it-yourselfer project and it didn't go well. I can remember the first time I was 15, I thought I would tune up my brother's S10 Blazer with a 2.8 liter. I got every spark plug crossed and wire and just backfired, and I had to go in with my head hung down to the auto repair shop and say, "Can you guys fix this?"
Well, we get that once in a while. I mean, we see brake calipers hung on upside down.
Yep.
And sometimes people don't even know that they made a mistake. We brought it in for maybe something else, or the typical husband did the work, wife drives the car to work, and then brings it to us for maybe an oil change unrelated, and we go, who did this brake job?
Well, I think a brake job is for someone that's handy and good with tools is something that's still, it's not out of reach. If it's an Asian import or a domestic car, there's no special tools really required. Every now and then, if you got to compress a rear brake caliper, maybe there's a special tool to do that. But that's one that you can certainly do in the driveway. Rotate your tires. Get your car jacked up on jack stands. Rotate your tires. Give you a chance to look at the brakes.
Always again be cautious to torque the wheels to the proper spec. You don't want the guy like the shop with the impact gun just blasting away, but you don't want to leave him loose either. I mean that's happened once or twice.
So brake jobs are still one that I think I see people doing on a regular basis. Air filters, of course, I mentioned that. Cabin filters. Most people don't know they have a cabin filter until you tell them about them when they come to the shop. But in some cars, it's pretty easy to change the cabin filter.
Yeah, some of those take 15 minutes. You can change them yourself. That's a good way to save a few bucks, and it's something that you can do it on a Saturday afternoon. If you don't do it right or something goes wrong, it's not going to affect your ability to get to work on Monday, and it's not a big deal to correct either usually.
Well, and then light bulb checks.
That's the easiest thing and can save you the most amount of aggravation. I have a customer that she had a burned out license plate light bulb on her Nissan pickup. She went to Flagstaff a lot. There's drugs running around, and that's a corridor, I-17, I-40 there. Driving along at 1:30 in the morning. Luckily, she wasn't doing anything illegal anyway. That's not what she was concerned about. But gets pulled over. She can't imagine why DPS is pulling her over for going 55. One license plate light bulb burned out. You just don't need the aggravation.
You were telling me a story about that where they, was it Bosch had sent out a kind of like a car to test different auto shops, and they brought it in with kind of some problems that were staged, and you were the only shop to catch the light bulb.
Well, yeah, I'm pretty proud, and I'll brag since you brought it up, Dave. We're a Bosch service center, so Bosch is synonymous with European imports or European cars. But as a matter of fact, Bosch as a company, I don't think there's a car manufactured that does not have Bosch parts on it. There really isn't. You find Bosch as a company everywhere. But they occasionally check up on us. So they have a plant car. They have a bait car, if you will.
Right.
So they bring it into the shop, and they ask, the consumer comes in and says, I'm going to go on a trip. I need my car looked at. So we looked it all over. We didn't find anything wrong with the car, except it was either a taillight or a license plate bulb was burned out or not working. So we told them about it, and they said, sure, go ahead and fix it. And when we opened up the lens, and we just found the bulb lying there. It just fell out. So we just plugged the bulb back in. It worked. We put it back together, didn't charge them. And then afterwards, I got a report. Boom, my email box lights up, and there's a report from Bosch. We were the only shop that discovered that the bulb was burned out in the first place, and then we put it back in, didn't charge them. They couldn't believe it happened.
Well, I think I'm going to send a bait car to your shop with some tricks up my sleeve.
Please do.
Some hidden stuff, just to see if your technicians are on their toes.
But again, the lights, the tires, that's very simple. Tire pressure is going to be on your on the door jamb sticker. Maybe it's on the gas cap in the owner's manual.
Is there any point or savings for someone doing their own oil changes? I think there's a certain amount of pride that goes in working on your own car. Yeah, I changed the oil today.
If you like to do that stuff, what's the guys, you get a 12-pack and a 6-pack of oil and a filter.
Right.
But, you start putting the math to it. You can get a $29.95 oil change special most places. You can hardly go buy the oil and the filter, and then you got a mess to deal with, and, it's just a mess.
Up for this segment, let's go with put down your cell phone. Let's go with Tony in Phoenix on a 2006 Impala. Go ahead, Tony.
Hello?
Go for it, Tony. You're up.
Yeah, I got a 2006 Chevy Impala with 21,000 miles on it. I was just wondering when I should get a transmission service done to it.
It's all you, Dave.
I would say at least by 30,000 miles, I'd like to see us service it.
Even though it's 6 years old already?
As far as, yeah. Definitely. There's run-in with transmissions, so the initial run-in period, it can't hurt to service it at 20, 30,000 miles.
Well, but what I think he's asking, Dave, is there any effect of the transmission fluid on time? His concern is that it's 6 years old and only 21,000 miles. Tony, let me ask you this. Is this a car that you recently acquired that has low miles, and now you're going to start driving it and start Okay, so the first 6 years are not going to be like the next 6 years.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, I would say definitely service it. I don't worry too much about transmission fluid and time. It's not a huge concern. Reasonable. If the car doesn't get driven much, every 3 to 5 years is sufficient.
Well, but on that same note, so I guess what I'm hearing, Tony, and what I would say too is don't worry about it right now. Do it at 30,000 miles. However, if you just got this car, there's a couple fluids that you do need to be concerned about with time. One would be the antifreeze, the engine coolant. That's got Dex Cool in it. Probably is time to get that flushed and get it out. And then the brake fluid. A lot of manufacturers say change the brake fluid at 2 years. Some say change it at 4 years. And there's actually tests that we can do to check and make sure that the brake fluid is okay, or if it needs to be serviced. So those are the other two you might consider. But otherwise, start your services at 30,000 miles. That would be your zero in your book, and carry on from there.
Boy, you're really awake this morning. I appreciate that.
I am. I've got to figure out. I've got a wife on the side of the road I need to figure out too.
Well, thanks so much for the call. Let's go with Kyle in Mesa on a 2004 Dakota. Go ahead, Kyle.
Oh, I'm Steve. Hold on, Kyle. You're not ready because I am not paying attention. I'm telling you.
Falling asleep
Kyle,
at the
you're
switch.
up.
I my truck just recently went over to 100,000 miles, and I've done a transmission service, cooling system service. Is there anything else I should try to get done before it? Before any issues pop up?
I wouldn't say by just simply having 100,000 miles on it, not necessarily there's anything, just off the top of our heads. You really need to get into your owner's manual and look at the maintenance requirements, and they're going to have, 5,000, 10,000, or 20, 40, 60, 80, 100,000 mile services. And that's going to give you a guideline. But, we were going to talk about October, it's Fall Car Care Month. All of the bumper-to-bumper shops are offering a free maintenance inspection for our listeners. So that would be the kind of thing they can look. Now, we're not talking about using tools and taking tires off and doing diagnostics and putting the car in the rack. We're talking about under-hood fluids, tire pressures, probably a battery test, peek in the wheels and see if we can see something. And I'm sure most of the shops will upgrade that for a small fee if you want to do all a full analysis.
Right.
But that's the best way to establish a baseline, especially at 100,000 miles.
See where you're at. Some of the things I think of 100,000 miles, I don't know if it was two-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, but transfer cases or the four-wheel drive, people often forget to service the transfer case. It's always in use, even though you don't put it in four-wheel drive. The other thing is differentials. I like to see differential serviced every 30 or 50,000 miles. So those are some of the other things. Spark plugs, 100,000 miles, if they haven't been done.
But again, when you get a 100,000 mile car, we don't know what was done at 80, what was done at 60, what's on cycle and what's off cycle. So that's where I get a problem with some of these 100,000 mile service, or you need our green service, or you need our yellow service, or you get this package. You may end up with this box of goods that you only need 6 out of the 10 things, for example.
Well, that's where the inspection comes in. Look at a spark plug. See how good it looks. See if it's original or if it's been changed out, things like that.
Yeah, if we can pop one out and take a look at it. So,
do you pop them out or do you guys use wrenches?
Well, we don't pop them. I'll slap you. We use a spark plug socket, and we remove the spark plug, Dave.
Well, it looks like we got Will on an oil question. Go ahead, Will. You are on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Hi, how you doing? My question is, I recently bought some Penzoil. I believe it was 1030, and it's rated for 75,000 miles. 7,500 miles. I apologize.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Anyhow, what is your thoughts on that versus the 3,000 miles?
What kind of car are you putting it in, Will?
It's in a pickup truck, F-150, 2002.
Okay. Well, my biggest thing, again, there's a lot of debate in the industry about how long should you let your oil go. And if the oil is rated for 7,500 miles, if the engine is running well and you've used a good quality filter, I'm sure that will be just fine. My biggest thing on extending the life of an oil change, if you're doing it yourself, you're on top of it probably, but if we tell you 5,000, we usually see you in 7,000. If we tell you at 3, we see you in 5.
Right.
Typically. That's a broad stroke, but it's not so much changing the oil that becomes important.
It's getting that hood open.
It's getting the hood open and making sure that the hose clamp isn't loose or there's not some coolant leaking or something else happening that needs attention that isn't going to last until you get to the end of the 7,500 miles, I guess is my point there. So, but I'm sure the oil will be just fine.
Do you notice there seems to be a lot of automotive recalls lately?
Yes.
Honda just came out with a recall on CRVs from 2002 to 2006, I believe it was, for the master switch, window switch in the driver's door. You can get some water down in there, damage it, catch it on fire. So there was one from Honda.
Well, there's two from Honda because then there's one for, 500,000 Accords that have a power steering leak that could go on the exhaust and cause a fire, although it hasn't happened yet. So they're getting prepared for it to happen.
A lot of mid-sized GMs from 2007 to 2010 apparently just roll away in the parking lot. Shifter cable is going bad on the manual linkage for the transmission.
And then GM has the Chevy Cobalt, Pontiac G5, Saturn Ion, and a Pontiac for a fuel pump. We just repaired one for the same problem the other day, and then they announced the recall, just a couple days after. So I'd be willing to bet it's overheated. It's a BMW. If you have a BMW, pay attention. It's got a plastic water pump.
Impeller, plastic water
plastic
pump.
impeller. And she has an overheating problem, and I know the car doesn't have any leaks. As a matter of fact, we just serviced it. And I was talking with Charles, my BMW Master, and I said, man, should we do it? Just replace everything? Because we're keeping the car forever, and it's a common failure. The cars, whether it's Volkswagen, BMW, Audi, GM, Ford, they have a lot of plastic components, and it's a weak link. So at 60, 70, 80,000 miles, there's a point in there when you just need to decide, do you want to be on the way to the soccer game with the kids broken down, or do you want to be proactive and say, I'm going to keep this car for 10 years. I'm just going to do this because inevitably we're going to do it anyway. So now we're being forced to probably do what is going to be the water pump and thermostat housing and such, and just get it out of the way. But that's my bet. But it's always fun to manage,
I'll see if you're right. I think you might get a job on the radio answering car questions. But if you're wrong, we're going to find you somebody else. We've got Julie in Chandler. She's got a 2006 CRV. Maybe she's calling about the recall on her vehicle. Hey, Julie, how you doing?
Hey, I'm okay. Thanks for taking my call, guys. I have a 2006 Honda CRV with 110,000 miles on it that the AC has just given up the ghost. And my question is it safe to drive for a little while without the AC, or is that hooked into the system enough that it's something I need to get taken care of right away? Because if it's the compressor, which I know had a recall before, it's going to be expensive to get it fixed, and I just need a little time. But is it going to hurt the car if I don't get the AC fixed right away?
I would say if the compressor clutch is not locked up, there's no harm in driving it. Just don't turn it on. On a CRV, it is definitely an expensive air conditioning system to redo.
I know.
Because you got to go for the whole kit and caboodle. There's no just put a compressor and a dryer on it. I mean, it's everything. The condenser's got to be done. Maybe the VAP core needs to be replaced.
Well, when I first heard the question, I thought to myself, 100,000 miles in a CRV, and the AC made it that long?
It's pretty good.
I've seen them 10 or 12, 15,000 miles even. So, yeah, it's and then the question, like Dave said, it just depends. If as long as the belt can rotate freely and not cause a problem with the clutch or something like that, yeah, it's just fine. Now, your air conditioning does actually work in the wintertime. The manufacturers use it to help defrost the window and dry the cabin, but you don't need to worry about it. You'll fine. Save your money until the spring. As soon as you get the threshold where you can't stand it anymore, maybe April, then go for it.
I don't know. It's still 103 right now, so October may kill me. But
well, Julie, I don't know if you caught it, but you're right. At the 2006 Honda CRV, there was just a recall announced for a driver's door window switch that can cause a fire. So you might want to check your mail for your Honda recall.
Yes, definitely.
Cool. I'll do that. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the call. Well, let's go with, that was appropriate. Let's go with Steve on a 2004 Ford Taurus. Go ahead, Steve. You're on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Good morning, guys. Got a 2004 Ford Taurus. Got 116,000 miles on it. Just did 110,000 mile service. Went through the whole vehicle, front to back. Got everything done. Being that I'm going to keep the car for the rest of my life if I can. And I had the brakes go out on it here a few months ago, and now I'm getting the ABS brake light is coming on, and the brakes are working fine. They're not a problem, but I'm driving down the road, and all of a sudden, everything will shut off. I took it in. They said both computers needed to be replaced, that they were malfunctioning due to the brake job, and they're talking $1,800. Does this sound right?
Something sounds funny here. Let's back up a little bit. What do you mean the brakes went out? And what did you have done the first time?
The rear brakes needed to get done, so we went ahead and did my ASE certified retired mechanic did the rear brake job on it. They're telling me that the sensors or something with the computer system, because he couldn't diagnostic it because the ABS brake light was coming on and the system. Then I just started having intermittent stalling, and complete system would just shut down and the vehicle would shut off. I'd stop, start it up again, it would be fine. The light would go off, and then 5 minutes later, the ABS brake light would come back on.
The two almost sound unrelated to me.
And when I took it in to have it looked at, they said it was the computer system. I guess there's two of them that are connected to this ABS brake system, needed to be replaced, and they're quoting me $1,800.
Okay, what other light comes on besides the ABS light? Because you said the light comes on and it doesn't run right.
Okay, the ABS light comes on and the brake light comes on. It's not the service light or the idiot light.
But then are you saying that the car doesn't run right, like actually the engine running, or are you saying the brakes don't function properly?
No, the brakes function perfectly as I've just pulled into my driveway.
Okay, so you don't have any symptoms that are associated with these lights?
No.
No. Okay. Well, I think something sounds funny to me, and I caught another thing that you said. We were talking about do-it-yourselfer. My retired ASE mechanic did that. And I'm not bagging on the guy, the Shade Tree retired guy. He very well probably did just a fine job. I don't think that something's not adding up here.
Well, it's a little more than we can digest here on the radio, Steve. But if you want to go to bumpertobumperradio.com, go to the contact link, send us an email, and we'll help you work through it and help you understand the repair. Or if something doesn't sound right, certainly audit it for you. So thanks so much for the call. Let's go with Ken in Phoenix on a 1996 Ford Explorer. Go ahead, Ken. You're on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Car has 54 or 45,000 miles on it. My horn and my cruise control went out at the same time.
Oh.
Now, I was able to pull the fuse for the horn and replace it, and it blew again. So I'm trying to figure out what's next.
I don't know. What do you think of Matt? Clock spring?
Yeah. The horn, the clock spring is a wound up ball of it's like a tape of wire basically, because you have all the steering wheel controls, your horn, your airbag, maybe your stereo, and your cruise control. And when you turn the wheel, you've got to still maintain that connection. We used to have just a button that would do circles and ride around on a ring because you only had the horn to worry about. But now
we got more advanced.
All these electronics. So picture a paper clip and you just start bending it and bending it and bending it. Eventually it just breaks. So same thing happens with the clock spring. It rotates and turns a number of times. That's the largest common denominator. That's the first thing I would be looking at, besides the obvious fuses and such.
That's going to be a situation where a shop's got to, remove the airbag, remove the steering wheel to get that clock spring. So.
Oh, the airbag's never been used.
Well, that's a good thing.
I know.
And it's never going to get used if that clock spring's not working either, because that's what gets the power, makes the connection, is that spool of wiring in there, if you will.
So,
okay.
Well, thanks so much for the call.
It's not something that I'm going to fix then.
Not likely. No, you don't want to be messing with that. You make a mistake and you buy an airbag or get a blast of the airbag to the face, you'll be that'll be one of the do-it-yourselfers you wish you would not have done. So.
Okay, that's what I need to know. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you.
It's time for Fact or Fiction.
I had a couple cups of coffee, so I'm confident I can get this right.
So now I'm on the podium for Fact or Fiction today, and I've already forgotten what it is, Dave. I know this is going to drive you crazy, but so Fact or Fiction: using my parking brake will make my brakes last longer. Now, when I say that, I'm not talking about using your parking brake to slow down, Dave, so don't try that. When you park, use your handbrake or your foot brake, otherwise, a.k.a. the emergency brake, helps your brakes last longer. Fact or fiction?
One question, two answers. Fact, if you have drum brakes. Fiction, if you have rear disc brakes.
Okay, so how does it help the front? Or how does it help the brakes last longer?
Well, it keeps them in adjustment. So the brakes don't get exercised fully, but by pulling the parking brake, it's going to allow the little star adjuster. You're the general repair guy.
How's that coffee working out?
Yeah, not so good.
Okay, so simply the use of the parking brake, doesn't make your brakes last longer. But what happens by using the parking brake?
Keeps them in adjustment.
It keeps the rear brakes properly adjusted. So they're going to do their fair share of the work now, and so the front brakes won't be overworked. So there are several benefits. The front brakes are going to last longer, your brakes are going to work better, and your parking brake will work.
And one of the things you don't realize is that when the rear brakes get out of adjustment, they're almost doing nothing. Because the majority of the braking is in the front. So it's the first thing we do when we lift the car. We can take that rear tire and spin it.
That's what I was
if it just keeps spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning, the brakes are way out of adjustment. There should just be a little bit of drag, and that wheel should spin maybe 1.5 times.
A couple rotations. And if you have a hybrid, we had this. We over-adjusted a little bit on a hybrid, and the lady came right back 2 days later. My fuel miles is down. And it instantly known. We looked at it. Sure enough, we had the brakes just a little bit tight. So if you're at home doing your do-it-yourself, you're doing your tire rotation, spin that rear brake. If it's got drums and it just keeps on spinning, you need an adjustment.
Well, up for this segment, we've got Jared with looks like 2006 Saturn Ion. Go ahead, Jared. You're on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Hey, guys. How you doing today?
Good.
Good. I have a Scion, has a cold air intake, modified exhaust. Just in August, got some water sucked up into the intake, and they replaced my engine. After I got it back, it's got a custom stereo system in there. One of the lead wires that run to the battery for toggle switches that power the amp was disconnected. I hooked it back up, and then all of a sudden I lost power to my car, hit 3,000 RPM, everything bogged down, sent it back to the shop. Then they replaced the mass airflow sensor. They said that's what it was. Got the car back, hooked up the wire again, same exact thing. So I sent it back to the shop. They replaced the mass airflow sensor. They said, probably because it wasn't the original part. It was aftermarket. Well, now I'm afraid to hook that wire back up because I'm afraid it's going to happen again. Any thoughts?
And you're talking about the wire. Is that your big fat lead heavy wire that powers the amp, or is it just...
No, it's not. It's not the 4-gauge wire that powers. It's one that goes to toggle switch. So the amp doesn't automatically kick on when you turn the stereo on. So it actually has custom toggle switches for the front amps, the rear amps, so you don't have to always drive with the system on.
Well, the first thing I would ask, are you telling the shop that's making these repairs that you're having this problem with this wire connected, or are you disconnecting it and then taking it in?
It was disconnected when it went in because they said it had nothing to do with it.
Well, there's something, again, this is one of these fishy ones. It's obviously related somehow. I would, if this were coming to my shop, I would want it hooked up as it is when you're having the problem. There's no sense in disconnecting it. If it's not part of the problem, it shouldn't make a difference whether it's hooked up or not. So, again, something's not lining up here. Dave, you're looking at me like I'm slightly crazy, but...
I couldn't see what hooking a wire directly to the battery would do to the mass airflow sensor.
Yeah, it
doesn't quite make sense. But if it was hooked up, and you went in, that's a perfect way to do it. It's got to be hooked up when you go in and let them diagnose it with that wire hooked up.
Yeah, definitely. And if you want to follow that up with us, again, you can go to Bumper Radio anytime, bumpertobumperradio.com. Go to the contact link, send Dave and I an email, and we'll look into it for you. If you can provide us with some receipts so that we can fully understand what has happened and what's transpired here. But it sounds like you need to go back and retrace. Whoever's looking at this, retrace, make sure they didn't pinch any wires, replacing the engine, make sure there's no water contamination in any of the weather pack connectors. There could be a number of different things.
Well, and the mass airflow sensor got wet with that whole hydrolock situation. Maybe that's related. Maybe we got some residual water in there. I don't know. So anyway.
Too much for the radio.
It is. Thanks for the call, Jared. Let's go with Mike in Glendale on a 2002 Ram pickup. Go ahead, Mike. You're on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Hey, morning, guys. I'm trying to figure out, got this weird bounce. And when you're going down the road about 45 miles an hour, it feels like it's in the middle of the truck. It's a quad cab, so, it's normal, short wheelbase quad cab. I thought maybe, tire out of balance. I have brand new tires on there. I checked the mounts on my cross member for my transmission. I thought maybe the boots were worn or something. I've looked on my drive shaft, and from what I can see, all the weights are on my drive shaft. I can't figure out where else I would be getting a bounce from.
Do you feel the bounce in your butt, like sitting on the seat, or is it during brake application, or just cruising along at 45 miles an hour?
It's not during the brakes like you have when you have a warped rotor or whatever. It's not that. I've even went around and retorqued all my lug nuts to make sure everything's even. And it's when you're going down the road, riding down the freeway, you just get this it's a weird. It's kind of like how the funny cars look when they pull out on the race line. The center of the truck. It feels like it's bouncing. I don't know. It's weird.
The first thing I would do is just to change something to see if anything changes is rotate the tires. I mean, he says he's got new tires on it, but I've seen a new tire that was balanced and was defective from the factory.
I just tried to balance a tire the other day. I mean, I didn't personally. Brand new tire took a pound of weight, so it was a brand new tire. It's no good. So definitely look at that. Good idea to change that up. Does the truck have rear disc or rear drum brakes?
It's four-wheel disc.
All-wheel disc. Okay, I was thinking a drum out of round. It's still possible to have it's a big giant brake rotor on the back of there with the parking brake inside of it. That's a possibility.
I mean, I serviced my rear end even. I thought maybe, who knows? I serviced the rear end, being that it's got 95,000 miles on it, and
you were looking at
the problem.
You were looking at weights on the drive shaft. Did you actually grab the drive shaft near the U joints and just kind of see if there's any free play in there?
Yeah, there's no free play at all. That was my next thing, because unfortunately, it's got the U joints that you can't grease. So.
And Mike, you sound like you're a bit of quite a bit of a do-it-yourselfer. You find your way under the hood and under the truck pretty well, right? Yeah. Well, that's one of those ones, like Dave said, just change something. Go get a rotation. Otherwise, you're just going to need to get somebody to take a look at it. And you're in Glendale, Dave's Car Care. Dave Denman's one of the guys on the bumper-to-bumper radio.com list. Great shop for you to maybe start with.
Well, real quickly, let's squeeze an Izzy on a 2000 Acura. Go ahead, Izzy. You're on bumper-to-bumper radio.
How's it going, guys? Thanks for taking the time. I got a 2000 Acura, and it has a little bit over 100,000 miles, 120,000 miles, and it's automatic. My question is, I know for sure this car has never had the transmission fluid flushed, just serviced. I want to do a flush. I've heard that if it hasn't been done ever, it's not recommended, because with time, those gears kind of grind up and create some type of a coat that if you flush it, you take that coat with it, and instead of fixing it, it actually makes it worse.
That's probably the most common question that we get on the show, as far as, I've got a high mileage transmission, it's not been serviced, I'm worried about servicing, because everyone's heard these stories. Now, that 2000 Acura, believe it or not, that's about average for as long as that transmission lives. Now, the problem that we run into, if that fluid's been in there for 100,000 miles, it's lost all of its oil characteristics. So the transmission's going to go bad from just having bad fluid in it. So the lesser of two evils is actually to service that transmission. Now, if you want to do it in a way that's more sensitive to the transmission, it's a drain and fill transmission. You can pull the drain plug, get 3 quarts out of it, add 3 quarts to it, service it again in 6 months, and just kind of do it that way versus flushing the whole system.
We never, I shouldn't say never, but typically, hardly ever, almost never flush a Honda. The fluid capacity is very low.
7-8 quarts.
And they're kind of hard to get to. It's just easy. Just the drain and fill. That's one of the easy ones you can do. Make sure you're using the right fluid.
We are glad you could share your Saturday with us to start a relationship with a great shop, bumper-to-bumperradio.com. Thanks, Peter, for putting on a great show. Remember never to text and drive. He's Matt Allen. I am Dave Riccio. We'll be back at you next week.